You're listening to the Limitless Leadership Podcast, the podcast designed to help automotive repair shops learn how to lead, coach, train, and manage their team better by sharing proven techniques and thought-provoking interviews from industry leaders. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's today's episode.
All right, leaders, whether you're running a shop, leading a team, or leveling up in your career, you know details matter. And if you're like me, that includes keeping your beard on point. That's why I trust the Bearded Brotherhood. Their beard oils, beard balms, and mustache waxes, among other, are made with all natural ingredients, no junk, no shortcuts, just top-tier quality that keeps my beard looking sharp and feeling great. And let's talk scents. Whether it's their best-selling Woodsman or my personal favorite, Lone Stranger, the Bearded Brotherhood keeps me smelling fresh and my beard stays soft all day. If you take your beard game seriously, this is the stuff that you need. And because you're part of the Limitless Leadership podcast family, I've got a deal for you. Just visit thebeardedbrotherhood.co/lead15 to grab your favorite products and get 15% off in the process. Because a great leader deserves a great beard. Now, back to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Limitless Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Parnell, and today we have another fantastic guest with us today. But before I introduce this amazing guest, I want to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, it's at The Bearded Leader. Please leave a review, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Google, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Leave a review because the more reviews that we receive, the more we're able to reach people and build leaders, which, as you know, is our mission. And speaking of a mission, I'm joined by a guest today who is on a mission to help change the industry, to really help this industry grow and develop the way that it continues to. Our guest today is the host of the Auto Repair News Today podcast. He is also an industry podcast producer for a number of your favorite podcasts out there. Our guest today is a friend of mine. Our guest is Braxton Critcher. Braxton, thanks for being here.
Can I tell you my motto first?
Come on, let's hear it.
My motto is I'm halfway decent half the time. So 25% of the time you might get something good out of me. So introducing me as an amazing guest is definitely a stretch, but I'll just say halfway decent half the time. And typically, if you set the bar low, just about anything is better than that. So that's my motto.
The problem, Braxton, is I've already set the bar high for you. And what you just shared is debatable. I'm telling you, you're an amazing guest because I've worked with you and I've met you enough times to know this is going to be one of the best podcast episodes ever on the Limitless Leadership podcast. So I'm just continuing to raise the bar despite whether you like it or not.
Man, we probably just need to end it right now. I feel like the first minute and a half has gone well. So maybe it has been a good episode so far. But
it has been a good episode.
That is such a hot take.
Well, speaking of hot takes, let's get into who you are, what you do, how you do it. Let's get into really who Braxton Critcher is. So go ahead and share with the audience who you are.
Well, my name is Braxton Critcher, and I am not an automotive industry professional.
Okay.
That is
there you go,
how
folks.
I try to lead because I was previously in the radio industry and I worked for a couple of radio stations. And over the years, I developed a friendship with Lucas Underwood. And if you know Lucas, he is amazingly, he's a salesman at his best. He is very engaging. He has a huge heart. And he doesn't give up. He doesn't take no for an answer. That's Lucas Underwood. And so over the years, he kept saying, Braxton, I could use you to produce some of the podcasts. I could use you to make some videos for my repair shop. And for 4 years, I said, oh, that sounds really nice, but I just don't know if that's right for me. And anyway, just long story short, here I am. I produce a number of the podcasts you probably listen to, Jaded Mechanic. I help a little bit with changing the industry, David and Lucas, of course, my podcast, and Confessions of a Shop Owner, one of the newer industry podcasts with Mike Allen. So just to sum it up, I am a pastor's kid, Southern Baptist denomination was my dad, and he still is a pastor now. He actually is at the same church He's been there for 31 years, since 1994. So I
Wow.
grew up in the church. I always tell people, people say, "Oh, I'm there every time the doors are open." And I say, "Well, the reason you're there and the doors are open is because I unlocked them." So I grew up at the church. All my closest friends are members of my dad's church. And so I got to see a lot of different leadership types, things that maybe I would do differently, things that I wish I could do better, all that kind of stuff growing up as a pastor's kid. But pastor's kid, married for 3.5 years, and I produced a lot of podcasts, and I knew nothing about fixing cars. That's me.
Well, Braxton, first, man, thank you for the intro. Something I learned years ago when I got into this industry is, this industry as a whole, and you don't have to be in the industry to know this. It as a whole, it has or has had kind of a negative reputation. This industry really lacks the trust that is needed to provide a positive buying experience for guests, and to create this type of culture that your team can be appreciative of being a part of. And as a faith-based person myself, I was really excited to hopefully bring shine a bright light into a dark industry. And the good news that I've seen over the years is that there's a lot of amazing people in our industry who are feeling the same way, and who think the same way. They're excited to make an impact and make a difference in the lives of those around them, to impact the community, to really change the perception of what the industry has been kind of known as over the years. Can you speak to
Yeah.
what it's been like for you to step into this industry, having not a background in the industry, but also being that faith-based person walking into this, for lack of better terms, a quote unquote dark industry? What has it been like for you?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think you're right. The industry has that negative connotation. I think in some ways for good reason. I mean, a lot of technicians go into shop ownership, have no idea what they're doing, and realize that it's not about fixing cars, it's about dealing with people.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to deal with customers, how to manage, oh, I didn't get this repair right. We might have overcharged this and that. I mean, they know how to turn wrenches, but don't know how to be customer facing. And so there is a negative connotation, and there's still a lot of that there. That's the hope of changing the industry, to help change some of that stuff. But I have told this story before. I don't think I've told it to you, and it certainly hasn't been on this podcast. But when I first met Lucas, I had previously for the past, and I used to live in Boone, North Carolina, where Lucas is based. And I had been in college there for a few years. I lived and worked there for a few years after college, went to Appalachian State, go Mountaineers. But in college, I had a Subaru, and Subarus are a popular vehicle in Boone because of the snow and the kind of conditions you need all-wheel drive for. And my axle snapped on that Subaru. Probably negligence on my part. There had been some like popping and snapping sounds when I would turn it so far. Probably should have took it to the repair shop sooner, but I didn't, and it snapped. Had to call a tow truck, towed it to a repair shop that a friend recommended me to. Obviously, they had to order a part. This was not a speedy repair. It took a little over a week, but the things that I noticed at that repair shop were poor communication. They did not have a shop management system that dealt with me via text. It was all over the phone through the service advisor. And they finished my car and didn't tell me it was finished.
Hmm.
So it sat in their parking lot for 2 more days. And meanwhile, young 22-year-old kid without a vehicle, having to bum rides from friends and family, really could have used that car. And so that was frustrating to learn. By the way, they didn't call me. I had to call them to say,
Mm.
hey, just wanted to get an update, see where my car was at. Is it ready, or when will it be? And they're like, oh, yeah, it's done. I was like, it's done? I didn't know this. How long has it been done? Oh, 2 days. Really?
Mm.
Needless to say, I didn't go back to that repair shop. But I think stories like that are common in this industry, and it's simply lack of communication,
Yeah.
lack of understanding how to deal with customers. And so when I met Lucas, his repair shop is at the time was at a different location, was smaller, 3 bays. but you could tell they cared about customers because they had a nice seating area. It wasn't big, it wasn't super clean. It was an older building, but it was nice. They had good, comfortable chairs. They had a water station. They had, I think there was a TV. It was just, they had a clean bathroom, just simple things like that. And immediately when I went to Lucas's shop for the first time, I was like, oh, this is a little different.
Mhm.
And like I said, it wasn't like they had luxury recliners, they didn't have ESPN on the TV, but you could tell they had paid attention to some of the needs of customers. Hey, they might be thirsty. Let's give them a nice chair to sit in, a clean bathroom, and their service advisor was friendly. And of course, when I dropped my car off there, they sent me a text to confirm the appointment. They then would send me pictures with DVI, and I didn't know what all this stuff was at the time, but it made a big difference in my perception of the industry and was like, oh, well, there are good shops out there. There are people that actually care about their customers and treat them right. And so I've been in a bunch of other shops between that story and now, and there are definitely ones that are like Lucas's. They do it well, and there's ones that do it, better than Lucas. But there's still a lot of those shops that are just behind. And there's so many reasons for it, but it changed my perception of the industry in a big way when I got treated correctly for the first time. And that was still long before I got into the industry. So I learned a lot over the past couple of 5 years. But my first perception was not good, but it's really improved. The more you learn about anything, you will then to be able to develop a legitimate um, uh, opinion. And my opinion is that the industry is better than I once thought.
Agreed. I think that's very well said. It's interesting because if you're listening to this episode and you're a shop owner or you work at a shop, what we know, we have enough data and research to determine that 90% of your negative reviews that you have at your shop boil down to communication or lack thereof.
Yeah.
And there's so many opportunities as it relates to communication being the root of the issue that turns into a much larger issue. And if this is your first time listening to this podcast, something that I say often is that poor communication is costing shop owners 18% of total salaries being paid out on an annual basis, which means that if a shop owner is paying $1 million in salary to their entire team annually, poor communication could be creating sunk costs in the amount of $180,000-ish every single year. But here's the interesting thing. The story that you shared with us, Braxton, is it really boiled down to how Lucas and his team made you feel. And one of my favorite quotes comes from Maya Angelou. And she said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And the interesting thing about that quote is the first part of the quote is, I've learned that people will forget what you said. So here we are talking about the importance of communication and how important it is to communicate and communicate effectively. But the reality is they're not going to remember what was said. However, what was said is going to prompt them to have feelings that they're never going to forget. And this is why communication is so important as it relates to ultimately the growth and development of your business and your people.
Yeah. No, so many thoughts. The more that I have studied the repair industry, but the more I've just thought about business ownership, because I'm a business owner myself, it just about every industry, and the auto repair industry is more than a lot, but it's not the type of work you do, it's the people that you serve. And people in this industry don't realize that if you think of your business as a customer service business more than you do about fixing their car, I promise it's hard to get there, but it's so worth it. And you may think that, oh, like you said, making people feel a certain way is a big
Mhm.
deal. That doesn't have a tangible dollar amount on it. And I think it's hard for shop owners and people in the industry to gratify spending time and training and attention to that part of their business because there's not actual dollar signs attached to it, where there
Yet,
is on you
sorry, so I say
yet.
yet. yet, and I love that you're saying this. I love that you're bringing this up, because what we know is that connection creates engagement, and
Yep.
engagement increases performance. And too many of us will not take the time to work on connection and communication and the quote unquote intangibles, because we're not going to see an immediate
Right.
tangible result. However, you and I both know, Braxton, if we spend time connecting with our team, that's going to create more engagement, and engaged employees perform better. So it's going to take some time, but we live in this like very convenient, instant gratification type of world. If I'm going to ask you, like, I want you to go back and talk about, for the shop owner listening who's saying, what does it look like if you're suggesting I put my customers before my dollars, for lack of a better term? Because that's not what you said, but what you're saying is spend time focusing on your guest. It's connection before content. What does that look like if I'm the shop owner listening, struggling to know how to make that change?
I think especially in today's world, you gotta make things easier for people.
Mm,
And so many shops, I don't know the percentage, maybe you do, but so many shops don't have shop management software that helps makes things easier.
yeah.
DVI, texting. And in today's society, especially as you try to accommodate the younger generation, I'm in that younger generation, you've got to be able to make things quick and easy. And so many times it's like you got to call, they may not answer. If they do answer immediately, they say, "Can you please hold?" Things need to go fast. And if you're able to do like online appointments, if you're able to text people a link to sign up, that makes me, a lot of other younger people, a lot uh, really happy, and it helps our day move along, and we don't have to worry about having to call the repair shop to make an appointment, all that kind of stuff.
Well, because to your point, I mean, we don't want to, like, if so. Whenever I do a training, I'll typically ask the room, like, there's an audience full of folks, and I'll ask by show of hands, how many people in here regularly receive calls asking for the status or the update of their vehicle? And I would say at least half the room raised their hand. And what this tells us is that we are not doing a great job of setting clear expectations on the front end of the process. So are we asking our guests for their preferred method of communication? Are we
Right.
letting them
No,
know that we're
yeah,
going to be
yeah.
calling them at a certain time frame? These are things that, it's proactive communication versus reactive communication. And reactive communication in an industry that already lacks trust is not going to win the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I read a study. I don't know the numbers, so you can't quote me on this, but I think it was like 80% of boomers prefer to go to the shop, whatever the next generation that's younger, I forget that one. It was like it goes down every time. And it
Okay.
goes from visiting the shop to calling the shop to texting the shop. And
Okay.
so, you know, at this point, what is it? Gen Z are going to college. I
Okay.
think that's right.
I'm taking your word
And
for
so,
it. I'm so
and
confused with all the gens.
Gen X are graduate. I'm a millennial. I'm a very young millennial, but Gen X are very young in their career. I think Gen Z are going to college like as freshmen or they're late in high school. I think that's right.
Okay.
But as you think about when people graduate college and they need to get their cars repaired, they're getting younger and younger. And so that Gen Z, Gen X are young 20s, and they like dealing with things on their phone far more than making a call. Most of the time, even for me or people that I know, if you're going to a restaurant, you'd rather make a reservation online than call the restaurant.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
easier, it's faster. You don't got to wait on the, hold like I was telling you for repair shops. So I mean, anything that you can do to make your industry, your repair shop more techy will help, especially as you try to think about the future. That's where it's going, so why not start now?
You're right. You're absolutely right. So finding out what works best for that guest, whether it's calls, emails, text, carrier pigeon. I mean, I'm waiting for someone to do a carrier
Yeah.
pigeon. That would be
Yeah.
fun. But
Yeah.
well, let's talk about this some more then, Braxton. So you mentioned making things more user friendly, making it easier for folks. I love that concept. What else can we do to provide that white glove, red carpet service for our guests so that we can best serve them in the process?
I mean, I think little things like providing rides or loaner vehicles. A lot of shops are doing that now, but if you're not at yours, I think you should find a way to do that. Because, like in my case, that repair shop that fixed the axle on my Subaru didn't offer me a ride or a loaner vehicle, which in that case would have been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Lucas does that. He does loaner vehicles.
Yeah.
Um, I Lucas has gotten away from some of this because they're busy right now, but sometimes in the summer, he will wash and detail your car when it's done. Now, he says that takes a little extra time, and you really there is no there is. If you make someone feel appreciated and they get their car clean, they're going to want to come back to your shop. But he doesn't do it as much as he used to. But that when I got back into my car and it had been cleaned, the inside was detailed. I mean, I was like, whoa. You,
Yeah.
you kind of get, two things for one. You get your car fixed and cleaned. I mean, it's the thinking outside of the box of more than just fixing the car. It's trying to care for the person, and put yourself in their shoes of what would make me have a smile when I leave the shop. Stuff like that, that some shops do, but a lot don't, go a long way.
You're talking about how important it is to make things personal because
Yeah,
ultimately like there's automotive repair shops all over the place, but our guests are not going to come back to see us because we fixed their brakes or because we repaired their cooling system. They're going to come
right.
back to see us because of how we made them feel. We bought them flowers when we found out it was their birthday. We wrote them a handwritten thank you card.
Yeah.
We pulled their car up to the front. We washed their car. We detailed their car. We
And
gave
some of
them a
that
loaner.
stuff is, I mean, that's like another extra full-time job. So you may have to hire some. I get like some of this stuff, it is hard to do because it does take time away for whoever it is on your staff that's going to be doing it. But it does go a long way. And hey, you know what? If you start doing some of that stuff and you see your bottom line go up, hey, maybe you can hire, a customer service person, and
Sure.
they do that,
Yeah.
because it does go a long way. And you have to now because, like you said, there are lots of repair shops. The choices are, unlimited in
Mm-hmm.
most areas. Even small areas have at least five repair shops. So what are you going to do to make yourself stand out?
Sure. Love that. Well, let's talk about standing out. Standing out as a leader. This is a leadership podcast, Braxton. You and I have talked a little bit about leadership before, off air, if you will. And I really love a lot of the things that you've shared with me so far. My question to you is just a straight up simple question. What does leadership mean to you?
Um, I think leadership, when I see someone who exemplifies a good leader, it's someone who is usually mild-mannered, that doesn't get um, all caught up in little things. They are even-keeled, um, and I think people that own up to their mistakes and say, "Hey, I messed up. I'm sorry. I'll get better," rather than someone who tries to make excuses. One of my biggest pet peeves in life is excuses in general. And
Mm,
sometimes excuses are valid, but I feel like even if there are things that you could say, went into how you handled situation, or, were late to something, I think there's, in most cases, ways to work around even hindrances to poor leadership. And so I think leadership to me is someone who owns up to their mistakes, doesn't make excuses, um, and tries to find ways to hold themselves to a standard, whatever that is.
yeah.
It's different for other people, but hold yourself to a standard and try to work on yourself, improve.
I think if there are valid excuses, those are actually just reasons, because when like here's an example. Like
Yeah.
let's say you're leading me, Braxton, and you're holding me accountable to something that we talked about 2 weeks ago in our one-on-one. And then when we revisit this call to action that you gave me, I give you my reason as to why it didn't get done, but you're hearing it as an excuse. And until
Yeah.
you recognize it as a valid reason, it's a reason for me, it's an excuse for you. But I do
Well,
agree with you. Oh, go ahead.
so this podcast we're recording right now, I am real busy today. I had a lot going on. This week has just been hectic. This is actually only the second day of the week. This is Friday. Only the second day of the week that I've actually worked from my house. The other days I've been all over the place, just scattered.
Yeah.
And so it's been a hectic week. There's a lot of things in my to-do list that I really need to get done. And I forgot about this podcast recording.
I'm not offended. Keep going.
And it was 10 minutes till, and I got the notification on my phone. And I checked my calendar first thing in the morning and I saw it was there. I knew whatever time I'm going to record Limitless Leadership, that's the time. But then day went on. I had a doctor's appointment this morning. I was doing all this stuff and I forgot about our recording time. And I got the notification and said, oh my goodness. I was like, man, it would be nice not to record that podcast. Just putting it out there. Just being truthful with you right now.
Hey, that's fair.
And I then thought to myself, well, Braxton, you already had one scheduled, and then that morning you had something come up and you had to push it back. So if you do it again, that's two. Is that good leadership for a leadership podcast? And so I think sometimes you have to make hard decisions and you have to, when you say yes, then it means yes. That's also in scripture.
Yeah.
I like to point back to that, but let
Sure.
your yes be yes, let your no be no. And I'm a big proponent of following through on the things you say you'll do. And I could have easily messaged you and said, hey man, I'm so sorry. I know we've already, pushed this back. I've really got a lot going on. Can we push it back again? And you would have been okay with it. You would have
Sure.
said, yes, that's fine. But there's also something to doing what you say you were going to do. And there would have been reasons, but I like to look at them. And this is where I hold myself to. And there are, like I said, there's different levels of the standard that you need to hold yourself to. But I'm a kind of person that I have to push myself to say, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'll figure the rest out later. And I think in the long run, it goes a long way. So I don't know. I hate excuses. I don't like people that, don't follow through with what they say. And I think that is my biggest, thing about leadership is you got to have both of those qualities. And I fail a lot. I'm not perfect. But that's an example of, somewhere where I was like, I really would love to not record right now, but I think it's the right thing to do. So you're welcome, Josh. You're welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you, Braxton. Braxton's just airing all of his dirty laundry out now. But hey, man, like I appreciate you for sharing this, Braxton. To me, I believe that we can connect through three ways: authenticity, humility, vulnerability. You're exercising all three of those right now as you share that. And to your point, I love what you said. It's say what you mean and mean what you say, and being able to really follow up on the calls to action and follow up on the follow through essentially is I think an attribute that every leader should possess. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of us will find reasons or excuses, however you look at it, to not follow through on things.
But like for me, even if there are reasons, I still have to tell myself they're excuses. And they may be valid.
Yeah.
But I think once you go an inch, you then go a mile, and those reasons turn into excuses. And so I've been there, I've done that, I've gone the inch that's turned into a mile.
Yep.
And in some ways I'm not willing to budge. And it might be harsh on myself. I'm halfway decent half the time, but I've found that it goes a long way in making me a better person, and it goes a long way in the relationships I have. And I don't know, there's just something to holding yourself to being hard on yourself, holding yourself to a standard.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, man. So prior to hitting record for this episode, you and I were talking about leadership, just a few little things, takes on leadership, if you will. And you shared how there was some times in your life where you learned a lot about leadership based on poor leadership.
Yeah.
Could you share with us, maybe not necessarily an example unless you have one, but Can you share what with us what that means and how we can identify the good, the bad, and the ugly and learn from all of it?
So, I mean, I can share you an example. I can
Okay.
tell the story, but so I'm 28 years old. I'm not in a huge position of leadership, but I don't believe, and I think this is just how I feel, but it's also probably a fact. I don't believe you have to be in a position of leadership to show good leadership. And so there's been a couple of situations in my life where there's been someone younger than me trying to get into the career field. Like I said previously, I was in radio, interns, part-timers, things like that that were trying to get experience and learn things. And I really went out of my way to make them feel appreciated, cared for, and would spend time with them, help let them ask questions, let them shadow me for a day. There's not been a lot of examples of this. Like I said, I'm just 28, but the ones that I've had, I've really tried to pour into because when I was in their shoes, there were people that did that, but there was one person in particular that didn't. And that has stuck with me because I felt that person thought he was too good for me. And I never want to get to the place in my career where I've had so many successes. I've got this on my resume. I know this person to feel like I'm too good to help somebody else behind me up. Um, and that person made me feel that way. And maybe to this day, if I was to confront him about the situation, it was just inadvertent. Maybe he didn't mean for it to come across that way. But I was trying to get into radio. He hosted an afternoon radio show in a large market. And I said, hey, I'd love to just come shadow you sometime. Just come by the station, watch you prep, watch you do the show, and just take notes and ask questions. And he strung me along. He said, oh, yeah, that sounds good. That we should do that sometime. We got something on the calendar. He then had something come up we had to cancel, and we never got something on the calendar again. And I would text him, I would email, and I didn't want to bother him, whatever, but um, I felt like he had a lot of wisdom to share, and I never got to actually get that from him. And he ghosted me. And to this day, I think about that a lot when somebody else asks me a question. If I'm busy and I want to get going, I got something else to do, I'm like, I don't really have time for this, but I don't want to be like that guy.
Hmm.
And I, I, that's been a big proponent of my life to help other people because when something bad happens to you, you can either be a victim and say, oh, woe is me, or you can say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be better.
Yeah.
And I've just really tried hard to be that way.
Love that. Yeah, we can either be the victim or the author of our story. I
Yeah.
think that's incredibly well said, Braxton. And the hope, the hope is that that wasn't his intent, but what it sounds
Right.
like to me,
Right.
also just from a coaching perspective, is that individual may have not known or felt comfortable of how to have a quote unquote difficult conversation, and a lot of us
Right.
struggle with saying no. And it's really necessary. It's important that we
Yes.
set and more importantly keep boundaries. And so if the answer is no, just say it. Just be
That's
clear,
fine.
be
Yeah. Yeah.
direct.
Yeah. I would have
Yep.
been so much better off if I would have just been told no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could have moved on, found somebody
Yeah.
else. But
Yep.
instead, I spent a month and a half trying to track this guy down, and he just ignored me. And that wasn't cool in my book.
Sure. All right, Braxton. So last question for you. Best advice you've ever received from a coach or a mentor?
Well, I mean, that's that last story kind of is advice, what not to do.
Sure.
Um, but you know, um, my dad, like I said, he's a pastor, and there was one of my first managers shared this with me too. But it's from two people, but a similar idea is get up early and get up earlier than you think you do, than think you need to. And so, I and the reason that they said that was, hey, you get up early in the morning and you check a couple of lists or things off your list, and it does something to you in your mind
Yeah.
when you get to check a couple things off, and the rest of your day goes totally differently. So this morning, typically I get up about 7 o'clock. This morning, Josh, I got up at 8. And then what happened? I forgot about our podcast recording.
You're scrambling.
I got busy. I was
Yeah.
behind. And it's crazy to think that 1 hour makes that big of a difference, but it does. And so my dad, he gets up at like 5 a.m. I mean, I don't know if I can do 5 a.m. I'm trying to get earlier and earlier. I'm going to
Yeah.
try to start doing like 6:30 and whatever, because the earlier I've gotten up, the more productive I feel that I am. And I've seen a lot of things happen, and I'm like, oh man, this is really effective. And I
Mhm.
don't work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But man, it's crazy. Just getting up a little earlier, I get a lot more done. So that's been a big word of advice that I've had from that manager and my dad who do that, get up early and get a couple things done in the morning, and it really just changes the rest of your day.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Braxton. Okay, this really is the last question. So we alluded to your podcast earlier. You are an industry podcast producer of a number of different podcasts that you shared with us, in addition to the fact that you're the host of Auto Repair News Today. So where can we find your podcast? How can our audience get in touch with you?
Wherever you find podcasts,
Okay.
YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast are of course the big ones. I release Wednesdays, so every Wednesday you'll get 10 to 12 minutes of the top stories around the industry. It's like NPR style, so I read news that I've covered throughout the week. And then when I get a guest, you've been on my podcast before, Josh.
Yes, thank you
When
for
I
that.
get a guest and we do an interview, I'll release those separately as an interview. So you can find them there. And I always love to get advice, feedback on the show, especially if there's newsworthy topics that people think I ought to cover. I encourage people to let me know. You can email me at braxton@automotiverepairnews.com, and I'd appreciate feedback and, extra news, or, hey, if you want to be on the podcast, let me know too, and I'll have you on.
Love it. Love it. Well, Braxton, thanks for being on, man. This is not going to be your last time on the Limitless Leadership podcast. Thanks again for being here.
Hey, you're welcome. Halfway decent, man. Maybe you got lucky this morning.
That was all the way decent. That was amazing. Great job, man.
25%, man.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. Each episode, we look to transform our leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results. So thanks again. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading